Welcome back. The first of a 38-mile marathon has been completed, and it's gone decently well for me so far. I hope the same can be said for you. Today, I'll be taking you through my team, and we'll look at a brief overview of some of the players and some of the insights I have in terms of their upcoming fixtures, how I'm feeling about them. Then we will move on to 10 things that I learned from Game Week 1. I will be sharing that with you. And finally, some transfer plans for Game Week 2, which include a very, very spicy differential. If you are enjoying the content, if you could subscribe, that would mean the world. Thank you so much. If you could like the video, I would be very grateful. And without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. Right, so this is my team on screen. I generated 64 points this week, which I'm quite happy with. The reason being is I have Haaland in place for Game Week 2, and my overall consensus was that across the first 6 game weeks, yes, he has pretty good fixtures, but I still didn't think Mohamed Salah was worth it at 12.5. I thought it was a tad too expensive. Now, obviously, he's Hall Gaming 1, but for me to come out with this score, I still think that my bet that I've placed on Salah not doing as well to justify the price tag is still on. So I expected him to do well Gaming Week 1, and thus I'm pretty happy with the side. Building from the back, Sells, very unfortunate not to get a 10-pointer. Semenyo wiped that late on after Harry Toffolo put the ball straight into Murillo, and Semenyo swiped home from close range. Those things happen. He looked, and Forest looked pretty decent defensively. They have 2 good fixtures coming up. No need, no concern there. Not when you have Quansah and Barco. Now, the Liverpool centre-back was hooked for the second half against Ipswich due to the fact that Arne Slot was not happy with his duelling in the first half. Bit of an issue when you get hooked at half-time, I think, especially when Konate came on. Gave a very good account for himself. Liverpool improved drastically. It allowed Trent a slightly different role, one where he could stamp his mark on the game a little bit more. And given Konate is the senior player, I wouldn't be surprised now if he starts Brentford. Luckily, Schlott seemed quite straightforward, so hopefully we get something prior to Game Week 2. And we'll discuss my perspective on him within my team later when we look at the transfer plan section. Barker, we don't have too much information about, so that's a wait and see. I am hoping, however, it was just a tactical thing or maybe a slight injury thing, and he does come back into the side. Hall and Gabriel, I'm very happy with. I mean, Gabriel, I told you, is a lock for me, and given his fixture proof, I can play him pretty much every week. Proof. Hall returning in a game where they went down to 10 men, even though he's got a yellow card, I'm still very happy with, considering that game weeks 2, 4, and 5, I can play him. Right, Emil Smith-Rowe is here with the 3-pointer, but let's discuss him and why I'm probably slightly more bullish on that performance than most. One thing I particularly like about Smith-Rowe, and one thing I'm becoming increasingly fond of in terms of how to analyze an FPL asset, is their proximity to goal and where they're taking up positions on the pitch, how often they're taking up those positions. And he really was the 10. It wasn't Andreas. Andreas was far, far deeper. And on transition, it was Emil Smith-Rowe who was there. He was pressing up top in a 4-4-2. When they were on the ball, it was him floating in those pockets. He didn't drop too deep. And you know what? They didn't get a lot of the ball, and they weren't particularly good on transition. You watch Brentford against Palace. They were brilliant on transition. Their passing was so crisp, and they were so clean with it. Fulham, on the other hand, were very wasteful, I thought, against United. Thus, Smith-Rowe didn't get too many opportunities. But in the next few weeks, the reason we bought him is because he's not going to Old Trafford, and Fulham will see much more of the ball, and he will see much more. So overall, sure, he got hooked at 60, but just building his minutes. Maybe he'll get 75 against Leicester. And from what we saw Leicester tonight, they're certainly exploitable defensively. Thus, I'm very, very happy to keep him. And I was actually quite encouraged by the performance. I saw enough. It wasn't a world-class performance by any means. And it wasn't one to say that he's going to score a hat-trick from every game week here on. But it was enough for me to be bullish on him in the next few weeks. And if he isn't what we hope, there's a lot of exit routes at 5-5 with other players having very good fixtures. Nkunku, we'll talk about it in the 10 things. I really wasn't happy. Not one bit. He's one of those guys I'm considering of selling. I probably won't, as I'll explain in the transfer section. But yeah, I don't have anything good to say, really, apart from the fact that his prospects against Wolves look better. But from the City game, I didn't like a single thing. Talking about not liking a single thing, I thought Son was relatively sharp when it came to sequences away from goal. But in terms of like getting into the box, the positioning we talked about, the position aspect we talked about with Smith-Rowe, his goal threat, final touch in the box when he had a chance late on from Kulusevski, again, not too impressed, and something we're going to discuss in the transfer plan section. Saka, Havertz, my golden boys, these triple Arsenal stack, I'm hopefully never selling. I have a plan on never ever selling them. hopefully accumulate some value increases by 0.1 in each of them soon enough. I imagine Havertz, who's the second most transferred player in the game, would have done that quite soon. I mean, everything that's going to happen with Arsenal's attack really is going to have to go through at least one of these two, if not both. Saka's influence within the game in terms of every action, the fact that there's so much goal threat, even when he comes inside now, he doesn't have to stay as wide. And when he comes inside, he's so devastating with that left foot. He's done this particular sequence a few times towards the back end of the season more, which I noticed. And he'll come in and he'll just take one shimmy to the left, another shimmy to the left, and then unleash that shot. He did it against Wolves, and I've seen him do it repeatedly more in recent times. And I think his ball striking somehow has increased just a little bit. So in terms of avenues to goals, apart from the fact he's got penalties in his general open play threat, I like that mechanism almost, the fact that it's improving. Now, Kai Havertz, I of course waxed lyrical about preseason, and I only have good things to say about him. Again, I mean, like I said, everything's pretty much going through him and Saka. I was surprised he started at 9. I was anticipating he'd start this game at left 8 and Jesus would get the nod up top. I didn't think Partey would play it. But the fact that he's starting at 9 in these games means that I wouldn't be surprised if he does it pretty much every time now. Definitely will do so against Villa, in my opinion, which I really, really, really like, and I'm very, very happy with. We'll come on to him in the 10 things because I have a section dedicated to him there. But yeah, super bullish. Isak, obviously, they went down to 10 men. What can you do? Owned by pretty much everyone. And considering I didn't captain him, I'm happy he only got 5 points. Haaland, I thought was unfortunate not to walk away with more points. There were a lot of instances where City broke Chelsea's midfield line. They had themselves in isolated position. Doku's final pass was poor. Savio was brilliant in the first half, so it was a shame that he got taken off from that perspective. De Bruyne probably didn't get as much influence over those final actions as City and Haaland captainers would have liked, but there were promising signs there. And again, I will go into that in my transfer plans in more depth. In terms of the squad, I'm happy with it. There's only one transfer I'm really looking at making, potentially 2 if I'm forced to, not in the same separately. But overall, I don't think I can play him with 64 points. And the fact that I've got so many fundamental spots locked down. Haaland, Isak, Havertz, Saka, Gvardiol, Sells, Paul. 7 out of the starting 11. I'm very happy with. Make that 8 with Smith Rowe. Kwanzaa, Nkunku, and Son. They're the players in concern, and that we will address in the transfer plan section. Right, there is a lot to get through here. So let's start. I'm very happy with my Trent analysis. There was a chance in the second half where Trent was fairly wide and he whipped in a lethal cross to Jota, who had a header that went just wide of the post. He really should have scored. But the point was that from those wide zones, he generated a potential assist. That and those are the type of areas that he was in under Klopp slightly more, performing those type of actions slightly more. However, under Slot, what was a more regular occurrence, given that he's narrower, was that ball to Salah for Jota's first goal. The pre-assist, we're going to call it, right? Because he's in front of the block, he can't generate the same type of assist threat, in my opinion, as he did under Klopp. When you're in front of the block, right, your only real option if you want to go and penetrate the opposition with one pass is to go over their block or through it completely into one of the wingers. It's very difficult or very unlikely that you're ever going to get the scenario, especially with Jota, where you go over the entire block and onto the 9 and they'll score. Rather, I think he'll play these long balls into the wingers when they penetrate the half spaces, go in behind, and from there, maybe the winger assist, right? A textbook goal of that would be the Trent to Salah to Jota one. And thus, I wonder if his output goes down slightly. I mentioned this with Salah as well, and I know he did well in Gameweek 1. I expected that. But against sides like Brentford, who are better, there's Szoboszlai, there's potentially the left 8, to a lesser extent, the left winger. Did they take some of the output? And I think that will happen with Trent. I think he'll be unbelievable, but from an output standpoint, I think it was going to decline, even if it's slightly. I think Núñez will help him because I talked about him progressing from in front of the block. And if he wants to go straight to Núñez, it's easier when you have someone who's better at running in behind. But it's still a very difficult sequence off in the entirety, right? The pass has to be pinpoint, the touch has to be pinpoint, and the movement, the finishing, the IQ to use your body in a certain way to ensure the defender can't come across you, etc., right? So I think a lot of him will be a pre-assist this year, and that is just something I wanted to know, and it's something we saw against it. Now, this time last year, Kai Havertz did not have a good reputation, I would say, amongst social media and the fan bases, especially not as a number 9. However, Seeing him play there repeatedly and what he did at the end of last season, I urge you not to let yourself, or maybe you, but just like the general consensus in social media, blind you from what is happening right now. And that is the fact that Kai Havertz is a top number 9 playing in a top 2 team with brilliant expected minutes and goal threat. And he's only 8 million. He's going up to 8.1 soon. And I think you have to get on the hype pretty early. I don't think this is going to stop. Why would it, right? Arsenal are a top 2 team. They create enough chances. He's a good enough finisher. He has a lot of dynamics to him, which suit a variety of games, right? He's strong, he's quick, but hold-up-wise, he's good. He can run in behind. Like I said, he's a good finisher, etc., right? And I still think Arsenal are pretty much fixture-proof. Villa away, with the amount of transitions they conceded, types of transitions they conceded, and the fact that there's always space in behind given their system, well, I think he can score, especially at Villa Park, where they're probably be a little bit more attacking than they were at West Ham. Obviously, it's Arsenal, so they're going to adjust slightly, but nonetheless. And I really just wanted to urge the fact that he is looking so good. Don't let old judgments blind you, because, again, he was involved so heavily against Wolves. Minteh is someone we spoke about a bit pre-season. I didn't give him too much talk on this channel just because I was quite set on Smith Rowe, more so on Twitter. I'm a huge fan of the player. I think he's just going to be another one where Brighton make a significant profit over. I mean, he is so good. I described his legs as being slightly floppy, like a tree on Twitter. And if you actually notice, he's so light when he's one-on-one with the player, allowing him to go past them, but devastating when it comes to ball striking and actually hitting the ball, even if it is for a pass. Everything is so crisp and powerful. Even like his running style, right? At times he'll seem so loose, but then he can explode. And these type of things are quite rare, especially like when you put them all together, they're very rare. I think at 5.5, given he's such a good player, given Brighton look pretty good, his output is going to be fine to justify that price tag and justify having a place in your squads. Obviously, he had to come off with an injury, but he should be fine for Game Week 2. He's someone to definitely monitor as an exit route for Emil Smith Rowe, should you wish to do that after Game Week 2. Villa represented, I wouldn't say two extremes, but two different ends of the spectrum. Their attack, I was actually really impressed with. Considering Watkins was definitely off it, right? How can you blame him? He had no preseason. West Ham isn't the easiest game in the world to start. Morgan Rogers, I thought the role wasn't perfectly suited for him either. But even with all of that, they still managed to create quite a few chances and look dangerous going forward. So I think from Game Week 3, you should definitely have at least a plan to potentially bring Watkins in. Rogers, if his minutes remain good. I'm still not completely decided on Rogers. The main reason being, what happens if it wasn't Watkins who went off at 60 and it was someone else? Would it have been him? And the other thing is, I don't love him in this role. I feel like he needs a creative, a passer to help him. I think what Watkins and Diaby had going for them was that Watkins could always facilitate Diaby's runs, whereas I don't think he can do that for Rogers, given he's coming from deeper. And I wonder if having a passer, maybe like a Bailey or a John McGinn, but they're a bit wider, would help him. But I doubt Emery's going to tweak this. I do worry a little bit, just a little bit, for his output, because I don't think he'll be given the exact type of role Diaby was, because he's a different player and he can offer you a bit more defensively. But it's certainly something to note. And just overall, keep Watkins in your mind, because I liked what I saw for them going forward. Similar defensive standpoint I have on them. I don't love it. I think this system's always going to be one similar to Spurs, but nowhere near to the extent that you can exploit them defensively at times, and they're not always going to keep clean sheets simply because they can see too many chances in transition. Now, I'm not sure if Brian Mbeumo got a single shout out on this channel, but I was speaking to a friend about how I'd really like to own him for Game Week 1. And if I knew Tony wasn't there, I probably would have done, but you can say that about any player. I was so impressed by Brentford on transition. I mean, I thought they would have problems, and they did. I think Palace were unlucky to lose the game, as they definitely should have picked up some points, and we'll come on to him. But on transition, Brentford was so crisp. I have not watched a performance in a while where, quote-unquote, one of the lesser sides, and by lesser sides, I mean anyone else, were that good and clean and kept the ball so well and constantly created threat. Sharda was a huge reason for that, but just generally their passing was so. And given his talismanic nature for that side, given he has a high frequency of attacking actions, given he'll potentially have penalties if Tony's not there, I like it a lot. I don't see any reason why he can't get a return at Anfield. Then he has Southampton at home, who actually weren't that bad, by the way. So if it's from Game Week 6, sure, we can somewhat planned for that now, but just in general, if you wanted to go there now and take a bit of a risk, you had someone at that price point, maybe you want to Jota or Gordon for whatever reason. I was very, very impressed. I'm convinced Eze will get points. I don't care about the fact that he blanked. He shouldn't have blanked given that tremendous free kick. But the fact that he is the one who's constantly operating in those left half space zones, and he doesn't really move too far from them, right? Given Palace have a 3 at the back, they have enough cover whereby with the 3 in the pivot and Mitchell, if he ever needs to tuck inside, he doesn't have to do too much defensive work. But even if he doesn't have to go so wide. He's never too wide. And again, it comes back to that point, proximity from goal and from the ball. Always going to be able to get into those positions, pick them up. He'll find himself between the lines so much because he's acting as like a dual 10. And we saw his ball striking is so good. That's the main thing. Getting between the lines, he'll be stationed there anyway, and then leveraging his ball striking and just ability in the final third. I think he's going to do so well this season, and he can definitely exploit a West Ham side who have defensive problems. And Chelsea in Gameweek 3, well, you just never know. Right, now, of all the pieces of analysis here, easily the most niche one, but it was something that I picked up on straight away, and I didn't like it. So I thought I'd share it. There was a chance late in the first half that Nkunku had whereby he could have taken the shot on his left foot. He was pretty much one-on-one with the fullback, but he had a yard, and he could have smashed it straight across Ederson, and I was fully expecting him to do it. But he didn't. He came back onto his right. I was firstly very surprised and not encouraged by that. The Nkunku that I've seen and I know would have lashed that across Ederson, and he certainly wouldn't have looked for a pass to his teammate from there. And maybe I'm being overly critical, maybe, but I remember that instance specifically. It hasn't been talked about anywhere. The fact that I remember it so vividly tells me that I don't think I'm completely off the mark, and I didn't like that in terms of a reflection of his confidence. The other thing is he was very wide, not great. I don't think that'll happen against Wolves for what it's worth. I think he'll come back to the 10, Neto the left, Palm on the right, Jackson up top. Rise up Jackson side. I know he's caused City problems. He didn't have much of a preseason anyway. I thought Nkunku was going to start at 9. I wasn't best pleased about that. But even in general, his final third actions, normally they're a little bit crisper and they've got a little bit more flair to them, a bit more swagger, a bit more arrogance, a bit more confidence, whatever you want to call it. And they didn't have that. Now, is that because City are just so good and they always make the opposition look a bit worse? Yeah, maybe. Maybe he just didn't have the time that he usually does, etc., etc. Obviously, he's coming back off a long-term injury. Premier League football, this is not. How was he fitness-wise, etc., etc., right? But it's something to look out for. If he's not up to scratch Game Week 2, with João Felix signing, potentially playing in his position, potentially taking away minutes, he'll be close to the chopping block if he doesn't perform against. Unlike Brian and Mbeumo, one thing I did speak about preseason, how I thought City were going to be better and why I thought the system was going to be more optimized for Haaland, and thus he was a non-negotiable for me. I think it took maybe 15 minutes tops to see that this was indeed, probably 10, that this was indeed true. He's changed the system. He's gone with a diamond in midfield as opposed to a box. Can't crush them centrally as much. Can't cover the spaces. They have a lot more outs. But the main thing for me, preseason and in Game Week 1, was the wingers. There's so much more responsibility given to them as opposed to last year where Gvardiol had that hybrid role. Even the last time you had the widest player being Kyle Walker on the right, and it allowed the right wing to come inside. And he was essentially playing as an 8/10 as opposed to a winger. But this year, you actually have out-and-out wingers. You saw how much threat Doku and Savio created in that game. Doku had a lot of the threat, which resulted in him being in the final third, and his final third actions were slightly poor, right? Hence why Haaland didn't get any more. But there was a lot of threat generated. And if you imagine that was against Chelsea, who were okay, what happens when it's Ipswich at home with the greatest respect in Game Week 2? And chances are better and there's a higher volume of them. I just think Haaland's going to do so well. And if you don't own him, I just cannot see Game Week 2 going well for you. I think he's an absolute lock. I'm pretty much never going to sell him. I don't really care about the thing. I don't see there being too many bad for City this year. That wasn't even them even close to their best, right? Pep spoke about how he wasn't sure. And I honestly believe him because they didn't have, the best preseason or the longest preseason. Oscar Bob got injured, who's an integral part of that. Savio's just come into 2 minutes to Doku get. De Bruyne didn't have any preseason with them pretty much, etc., right? And they were still very good. So every week that goes on, I think it's get better and better and better. Gvardiol, definitely less attacking than last year and something I'd watch out for. However, I do also think they might concede less goals this year, just the fact that they're going to be even harder to beat. So a bit of a trade-off. I expect the same with Trent, by the way, for the fact that, yeah, sure, he might have less output. I do think that Liverpool's clean sheet chances, as opposed to Slot being not as, I guess, wild as Klopp or as front-footed, maybe balances it out. The last thing is Spurs, and it's just a very typical Spurs performance, right? There's so much that's good about it going forwards, right? Especially in the first half. And then it kind of all collapses. I think it's just very difficult to sustain that type of system for 90 minutes, especially throughout a season, because it is so intense and requires so much running. But there are a few things. I liked what I saw from Solanke in the sense that he will generate for himself, and the system mainly will generate for him a lot of chances. I thought some technical issues were maybe highlighted in this game that you probably didn't see as much in the Bournemouth side, but we can speak about that another day. Son's positioning I didn't love. I've spoken about proximity a lot with other players, and he was wide, right? And this was against Leicester. So what happens when it's against Everton and against a low block where you really need to with? Sure, Leicester had a low block, but it was still... What happens when it's better structured against Everton and he's potentially even wider for longer? May be a problem. And then the other thing was, they did look good in the first half, but a lot of it came down that left side somewhat. And the other thing, a lot of it was Maddison reliant. So what happens if the opposition just develops a structure which nullifies him? What if they man-to-man press him really well? An Andreas Pereira against Eden Hazard type. You know what I mean, right? Just somewhere where they nullify the creativity from that central source. I wonder if that could cause them a problem. I thought Bergvall was pretty decent pitch. Madison obviously had a good first half, but I still think there was a slight over-reliance on them. Porro didn't have as much of the ball. I also think when he's that central, the angle is slightly reduced and he has less time to be able to create and get those in-swinging crosses in, which is been traditionally quite good for Spurs, and him to Richarlison was a pretty good link up there. So that is something that I would definitely consider with Spurs. I'm probably not as bullish as Solanke after watching that first game as a result. Moving on to the transfer plan. So the one that I'm really considering is Son to Foden or De Bruyne. Now, he's a top player, and it's not a bad fixture, right? He scored in it last year. He can definitely haul. I'm just not convinced with what I saw today and the positioning on top of the performance, where I can expect to haul. I already had plans of selling him game week 3 anyway. I really like holding a Manchester City mid up until the international break at least, but potentially all the way till game week 4, game week 6, and beyond. I think the fixtures are actually pretty decent. Arsenal aside. So why don't I just jump the gun, right, and get myself Ipswich at home? Sure, it would be lovely to roll and have 2 free transfers. But a lot of people will be making transfers, I feel like, anyway. And regardless of that, it's a huge upside here, right? Who else is going to have a Manchester City mids that's Foden or De Bruyne, one of the premiums? Pretty much nobody. It'll be sub 5%, I'm sure, out of maybe the engaged, section of managers. And given I'm going to captain Haaland, no reason not to double down with arguably the best fixture. So I'm considering it. But what I'm actually looking at is De Bruyne. I did have this theory that because he came back from the Euros earlier, because he's been injury-free for a while, because the system's slightly different. Does he have more minutes early on? There's not as many games, right? Even if I get him for one game, 80 minutes home, and I have to transfer him out game week 3, the minutes look iffy, I think I'm willing to take that risk. Foden, I'm not sure will start, and I'm also not sure how City are going to line up. They've got Savio on the right, who I thought looked brilliant, right? I think that spot against Ipswich will be his. And then that begs the question, does he want to play Foden and De Bruyne in the middle again? Okay, cool. So he'll drop Bernardo Silva because Rodri comes back in. Okay, maybe he does that, right? But I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised to see Foden bench again, especially because he had less of a preseason. The one I'm really looking at is De Bruyne. I mean, world-class player with a brilliant fixture at home, game week 2, good expected minute. Takes 0.5 away from Son as well, which I can reinvest elsewhere. Maybe. If I don't do that, one thing I'll potentially look at is doing Quanta to Quanta. Because I probably want Quanta from game week 3. Fixtures are so good and they're so much better than everyone else. I know I previously said that I'm not particularly bullish on the Villa defense, and I'm not, but with such good fixtures, especially compared to pretty much everyone else from 3 to 6, it makes sense. If Quanta drops by 0.1, which he looks like doing, then I can't make this move, right? And I'll be locked out of it. Sure, I can, if I go Foden to Son to Foden, onto De Bruyne, then I'll be able to make a game in 3, but I'll still be down 0.1, which won't be ideal somewhere else. So I'm potentially thinking of making that move and just keeping some for one more week. But honestly, I'm leaning towards the Manchester City move. I see the upside. I don't see too much downside with it, really, right? Like, what's the worst? Big deal. I mean, I'm getting such a good opportunity. Why not take it? Moving on to Nkunku, like I said, I'm going to give him one more week. But if not, there will be a player who is on the right side of that arrow, because should his minutes not look great game week 2? Should I not like the positioning? Should I not see the ceiling potential? Should I not see the confidence? He's gone. He's going to go very, very, very soon. If I have to hold in game week 3, then so be it. But like, I really do want this guy gone sooner rather than later. It's such a valuable spot in that midfield if he's not performing, especially if I can get money out of Son. Because if I can get money out of Son, it means I can go Nkunku to Eze, which I would love. I would love to get Eze back. I spoke about how I really liked what I saw. I did. I'm bullish. I think he could do well against West Ham, and not owning him, I could just go Son to him and keep that move. Probably won't do. It's something that I would love to do. In game week 3 against Chelsea, again, you never know, but from 4 against Leicester at home, and then just kind of holding him for a long run at 7 million could be very, very, very nice. And that is the end of the video. If you could consider subscribing, should you have enjoyed the video, I would really, really appreciate that. Like the video if you did as well. And most importantly, comment, right? Tell me what you got in game week 1. Tell me what you're thinking. Any questions you want answered, I'm happy to do. As you can see there, Fantasy Football Hub, 50% off right now. The offer extended, which is good for you. It's good for pretty much all the customers out there. If you haven't signed up, consider doing so, because there's so much value to be had in the team reveals, in the My Team AI tools, 91 points, right? Pretty much every mini league. Wow. And yeah, my 64 pointer on the top left of your screen is also from My Team AI tool. So have a wonderful, wonderful day. I shall see you tomorrow. Again, if you enjoyed, please do subscribe.